Thank you for being here to listen to this podcast, Unschooling Sue. In this first podcast, I'm going to share some thoughts about unschooling. Unschooling, an alternative to school, which can incorporate homeschooling, family schooling, forest schooling, world schooling. I am sharing all of this to contribute to protecting this fundamental freedom for our children. I'm going to start with a little bit of my own personal story. So I'm a working mum. I work at home from Monday to Saturday, breastfeeding my son. I give English sessions online, sharing books, tools, resources to share the English language. Above all, I do unschooling with my son. And during this path in unschooling, I realized with all of the fun activities that we created together that it's a beautiful path, a very freeing path, and it is not reserved to certain social classes or an elite. That even though all parents and children are different, we can build a network, creativity, ideas, resources, above all ideas, to do unschooling together. It's really when I gave birth at home that I was able to give more concrete meaning to this path of unschooling. When I wanted to give birth at home, to give a peaceful and gentle start to my son, I had to unlearn everything that people had told me about the ability of a woman's body. And above all, I had to unlearn everything that I had learned about the intelligence of children and about their ability. This is a key part of unschooling that we're going to look at together. I trusted my child, I listened to my child, and he arrived that day on my bed. It was a beautiful moment where we were very close, and it's in that moment that we were really starting our journey in unschooling. And this had actually started a long time ago, questioning how I share the English language, how I translate and understand the world around me, and in my personal attempts to remain free in my choices and with my body. It's in this spirit of unschooling that I was able to read John Holt, who asks a very interesting question in his book, How Children Learn, The Vital Need to Understand. And I'm going to share an extract of that here, where he talks about a little girl who writes a funny little note to her parents when she wakes up, and she says that she's hungry. And she writes to her parents, "So, don't starve me. Please feed me. Please, please, please. Don't starve me. Will you starve me? What's your answer? Sign here on the dots, love, Cloud." So John Holt talks about the fact that he would like to say to that little girl, no, 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 we'll never let you starve. He thinks that this letter is full of imagination, love, and he continues by talking about the fact that that's what's the real charming part of childhood and children, is that they can invent a story out of nothing. And it's this joy, this limitless imagination, this curiosity that he helps us to discover and understand. And he reminds us that everything that children see is like a miracle for them, whether it be a branch, a leaf, a stone, a squirrel. And he concludes by saying that little ones love the world, and that's why they excel in learning something about it, because love is what's at the heart of real learning, not any thinking techniques or fancy tricks of thought. So he asks the question, can we finally let children learn and grow through that love? And he returns to the letter saying, "So, do not starve me. Will you starve me?" What is our answer? And so in this podcast, I am suggesting the idea that unschooling is one answer. Every family, every person has their own definition of unschooling, but I'm going to suggest a few ones here. So unschooling is about, first of all, following the natural curiosity of your child, letting them learn in a joyful atmosphere, whilst also giving them rituals and tools to manage their emotions, their sleep, and their food habits. I'm going to talk about some of the tools that we can share together, give some examples, and talking about why. And why these tools for managing emotions, that could be meditation, music, yoga, or other tools. But unschooling is really about respecting the intelligence of children, learning with everything that surrounds them, trusting in their ability to do so, and listening to them, really listening to them as much as possible, and letting them read, write, create as much as they would like to, whilst giving them the opportunity to be in contact with nature every day, even in a city with parks, trees, leaves. Unschooling is giving them a balance that allows them to navigate their inner world, their solitude, their thoughts, and the outside world, letting them be in contact with people from all backgrounds, people of all ages. Unschooling is also about accompanying them with a lot of caring, the caring of one parent, two parents, or another person, a neighbour, a friend, somebody from the unschooling community or from the community outside, somebody important to them. Unschooling is about letting them learn with joy, something new every day, learning to give to others, have empathy, and it's above all encouraging unique individuals and not conformists. Unschooling is about exploring real life and new subjects that we need to find to face all of our modern challenges. For example, it can be about learning how to grow your own food in an apartment, how to do permaculture, how to understand plants, how to take care of your body, your immune system, how to work with different tools to have silence, solitude, stillness in one's life. Unschooling can be all of that, and it's letting children take time, respecting their natural rhythm, their body, giving them the chance to take responsibility for their own learning. Unschooling is also giving them a mixture of solitude, privacy, reflection, and time with other people, time with other children as well. Unschooling is about letting children finish what they started, a song, a poem, a collage, questioning, reflection, without a bell ringing. Unschooling is about giving children time, not just competition or simplistic notions like winners and losers, but giving them a natural framework that respects their needs. Unschooling is about having more than the influence of your parents or your teachers, but having several points of view from real life, whether it be from real interactions outside in the street, in the outside world, in nature, or with information from the internet or from books or other sources. Unschooling is about the idea of persevering, being patient, accepting situations we find ourselves in everyday life. And unschooling is also about learning everything we can about nature, to understand it, to take time to contemplate art, Unschooling is also about the independence of our thinking and taking time to explore tools which are modern, like meditation, mindfulness, or other tools to develop confidence, our self-esteem. It's about being free. So all of that sounds lovely, but how can we do that in real life, in concrete terms? So I'm going to now talk to you about a few examples that I do as unschooling with my son. And of course, these ideas can be adapted to the age of your child or the way that they work, their personal needs, their personal pace. So at the moment, we are discovering meditation. My son is very curious about what's mummy doing, why is she stopping and sitting still and in silence like that, and in the living room every morning. And he sees me doing it every morning and he's curious about it. And especially when we move on from meditation to the breathing exercises, he is very obviously curious about why is mummy breathing like that, and he tries to copy it and it makes him laugh. And from there we often explore yoga, stretching, and that's something we've done a lot since he was very young. And so it's the opportunity to explore his body, manage his emotions in the morning. After that, he was curious about an apple that morning. He wanted to handle the apple, he wanted to touch it, and it's the opportunity really to show you that unschooling is letting the child learn with everything around them. So from that curiosity about the apple, and according to the age and the needs of the child, we can of course think about having gratitude for that apple, thinking about the journey that the apple has taken to reach our hands, explore its smell, its color, the recipes we can make with apples, explore how nature created this apple, the people that work with apple trees. That's it. The unschooling can go in all of those directions. We can go towards an object that surrounds us. We can open it up into many possibilities for learning. And as is the case every day after that apple, my son was curious about the record player, the second-hand record player from Emmaus that we have in the living room, and he was fascinated by its mechanics. He wants to understand all of it, how it works, and so we explored that. And then again, according to the age of the child or what they're interested in, you can talk about the history of sound, how we listened to music before with gramophones and record players, how records are made. We can understand them, how to put them on, how to listen to them. We can listen to songs from all over the world, their lyrics. Unschooling is infinite in its possibility. There's no limit. And from that possibility, very rich possibility, we can open up the world for the child. So we can of course wonder whilst listening to this, how can we know about everything? And I suppose what I'm trying to say here is that nobody knows everything, even at school. And unschooling is based on this humility on the part of the parents, and that's important for their child's self-esteem, to see that their parents are learning too. And I'm proposing this idea here that showing that we can be an independent learner, we can have critical thought skills, we can sometimes ask for help from an online tutorial or from somebody from outside, from a workshop, or from your own community or your personal surroundings, that we can show them that this is part of learning and that we can learn with other people and together. We don't need to talk down to them as if we are masters, put ourselves in a position where we know everything and they don't know anything. Unschooling is based on a more respect for children, and that's an important part of it. It encourages, of course, independence in learning, And in the same way that we can draw a parallel with our health, sometimes we need help, sometimes we might ask ourselves questions about how we eat, how we sleep, how we take care of ourselves. It's the same thing in this approach of unschooling. Sometimes we can do it ourselves together with books or other resources. So in all of that, we don't have to be an expert in everything, of course. Now, after the record player, it was time to eat. And so he was curious about a little glass jar that I have for growing sprouts, and this time it was mungo bean sprouts. And from that we can talk obviously about nutrition, the nutrition of sprouts and plants. We can talk about how we can grow our own food at home and the environmental aspect of that, link to that. And it is possible to explore all of that, to talk about texture of plants, to talk about their taste, to touch them. There are lots of possibilities. It's really the opportunity to learn together. And from those sprouts, it's time to move on, and we can adapt all of this to our experience, our work, our own home needs at home. But I'm just giving you some examples of what we would do. There are breaks, so we go back and forth with other people. But after lunchtime, I'm going to give you some other examples. So it was time to read. He was interested in books. These are books that are not very expensive, that are secondhand, most of them, and often we go to get them at the library. And the book that he chose that day was a story of a little girl in Africa, and so we were able to explore that country, the continent, its culture, its colours, its flavours. And then from there we can also go towards other books, not necessarily baby books or books for children, that can be books that they're curious about, books that are even much more complex than children's books, because unschooling doesn't limit reading to just babyish or childish books. It's a very interesting aspect of unschooling, is that you can explore all of that. And after that reading, it was quite obvious that he really wanted to move. So we went to the park to move around, and at the park obviously there are lots of possibilities. My son likes trying to climb trees, exploring the grass, even though we live in a city, that's possible. And on that grass, unfortunately there's a lot of rubbish sometimes, and so it's time to play a game with that, a game that he loved, and he's the one that initiated it actually, where he wants to understand which parts of the grass are natural and which parts are what we call dirty. So we're talking to each other in English because I'm Scottish, obviously, and sometimes we might talk about it in other languages. We might invite a friend who's Brazilian or Italian or other friends to speak in other languages, to understand all of that in other terms. And we explore how we recycle rubbish, and it's also the opportunity to talk about how we can respect nature, clean it, take care of it, and also learning about washing our hands, taking care of our own hygiene as well. It's the possibility to explore recycling and everything that means in today's world. So that's something that we're doing a lot of at the moment, and with a fun little game where we take a little box and we do that sorting together, and he's very proud of doing it. So it's very beautiful to see that, and that's another possibility. But from there, it's a question of really giving them time to discover. This time to discover and read is limitless in unschooling, and that's really wonderful with this approach. And I encourage you to go and have a look at the links and videos and references I'm going to put at the bottom of this podcast in the description box to discover the stories of unschoolers who are now adults, who have experienced this type of learning and who are doing a lot of passionate and interesting things, exciting things with their life. I really encourage you to go and have a look at that. Often these unschoolers are people who read and write a lot and create a lot, and that's really a part of people's concerns that perhaps unschoolers don't read enough, but it's actually the contrary. So I invite you to go and have a look at that. And as part of that, there's this notion that every child learns at their own pace. So some people learn at 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 years old. And in this approach of unschooling, this is very free and it's about respecting their natural pace. So again, I highly recommend looking at the resources below to get more detail and some very moving examples of parents, single parents and parents who have very difficult problems with illness, or even parents who didn't know how to read before and who learn to read with their children. It's very moving to see that, and there are some very concrete examples of the possibilities of unschooling when you look at that. So I recommend that you discover that in the resources that I'll put below this podcast. There are books, videos, TEDx conferences that I'll put down below. So after that walk outside and reading, again listening to each other and observing each other, and I noticed that he was tired, so I carried him for a while. And this closeness, this listening is really important in unschooling. And a few steps later, we came across an accordion player, an accordionist, and so we were able to discover this instrument. We talked to the musician about his working conditions. We listened to a French song. We sang a little together. And after that walk, it was, on his side, curiosity through play. And at that age, when they're very small, of course, playing, and maybe at every age, play is very important in learning. So I wasn't able to play because I had to go and work. And so it was another opportunity to learn something. So he was able at that time to learn to adapt to somebody else. In our situation, it's usually about adapting to switching over to daddy, but it could be, going to see a friend, a neighbour, somebody else from your community. It can be anybody else that you trust in the community to look after your child. And so that's an opportunity for them to learn about adapting to somebody else. It can be talking to somebody from a completely different social background, talking to somebody who's homeless, talking to somebody at a workshop, in a shop. All throughout the day, there are possibilities with unschooling to do that, to explore and interact. And this social aspect of unschooling is very interesting. So why am I talking to you about that, about unschooling in this podcast? Well, I'm passionate about it. I'm enthusiastic about all of the beautiful activities we can share through that. I'm going to show them in more detail on my Instagram. So this week we did a lot of painting with beetroot and turmeric, a lot of raw cookie recipes, a lot of beautiful activities that we do. But really, I'm talking to you about this unschooling because here in France today, this freedom is threatened, and it's a shame because the children that are taking part in unschooling are respected as intelligent human beings. They're not considered as adversaries. They can learn a lot by themselves and with trust and respect from us. If you are interested in discovering the writers that have written about this extensively, like John Taylor Gatto, Pat Ferenga, John Holt, you will see this spirit of questioning the independence of children in learning. They walk, they talk, they do a lot of things without us, of course with our love and our support. And all of this is very beautiful, and it's very far away from this idea of putting children into boxes and putting them into one single system. And above all, it's an idea of freedom. So, as I explained earlier, unschoolers tend to spend a lot of time reading, writing, and creating, and I really would like to emphasize that point, because you can go and discover that in the resources. And I think within that, we have to mention the fact that I'm aware that this is a very complex subject. I'm aware that there are parents who have a lot of difficulties, and I encourage you to think about this type of life, which is very free, and to go and see the examples of different parents who do it. Personally, I do it working from Monday to Saturday and breastfeeding. And on that note, all of these stories, these extraordinary stories of unschooling from parents who have a lot of problems with their work, with their health, with their personal life, are interesting to look at. And so I will contribute to that conversation myself by doing another podcast with a lot of ideas of how to do unschooling with a low budget. So, despite this complexity that I'm just starting to tackle, it's a subject that deserves to be debated. And unfortunately, there are some people that reduce this conversation to very simple ideas, very polarized ideas for and against school, and it's not quite that simple. And I encourage you to to consider not reducing something as important as the education and well-being of our children to such simple ideas that divide us. Personally, I have worked in nursery schools, primary schools, middle schools, high schools, universities, conferences, workshops, and I respected the learning styles in all of those places. But now I'm hungry for freedom, more freedom for my child. And like some parents, I really want to spend more time with my children. And I think that being with us, being connected to us, is an important part of unschooling. And it's very close to the anthropological concept, the continuum concept, which was explored by Jean Laidlaw. And I'm going to do a separate podcast on the continuum concept because it's a complex subject. But I'll sum it up briefly because it's very closely linked to unschooling. But this idea of continuum, this idea that when the child is close to our heartbeat, our breathing, carried by us, connected to us, in attachment with us, the fact that they're reassured, that their needs are met, allows them to have confidence, to be independent and free in their learning and to cooperate with us. And it's a very interesting subject, very close to unschooling, which I encourage you to explore. But in all of that, we might consider the fact that whether parents put their children in school or whether they unschool them or do any other style of education, for the majority of them, the objective is the well-being and development of their children. And yes, we all have a different vision of that, of what that looks like, but the freedom to choose how we do it is fundamental. And that's what I'm trying to defend here with unschooling. Some people say that they're worried about the development of extremists in this type of free approach. But I would like to suggest the idea here that It's this diversity and complexity of different educational approaches and realizing that there are different children, that we're all different, that contributes to intellectual and emotional freedom, that is part of a solution for a more peaceful society, and not forcing people into a choice of one conformist system. Social unity can be weaved differently by letting children go towards the real world and everything that offers to them, not just by putting them in one single school system. There are different ways to cultivate this, and so I encourage you on that topic to go and have a look at this question of, okay, so if we are concerned about extremists, if that's something that our leaders are truly worried about, then why are they not supporting independent artists, our researchers, our thinkers, as a first way of liberating us from all of that? Unschooling is a response to all of that, I think, and it's an approach which can plant the seeds of freedom, the freedom of thought, and finding solutions to our environmental and modern challenges. And it's perhaps also the opportunity to question ourselves about what John Taylor Gatto discusses in his book Dumbing Us Down, which I'll give you the reference of below this podcast. He asks the question, with education and our children, do we want to teach them to be a good Egyptian who knows his place in the pyramid and that's all, who is gradually learning how to impress a recruiter later in life? Or do we want to encourage our children to go towards something else, to dream of something else, other languages, other solutions, possibilities, cultivating children who are peaceful, with empathy, with the ability to have critical thought, and cultivating ideas to deal with the solutions for our environmental challenges? Is that something we want to develop? Unschooling allows us to do that in a very interesting way. And so what I'm trying to show you here is that this lifestyle, this education, unschooling, which is free, is very beautiful. And I'm going to conclude this podcast, this translated podcast, by returning to the letter that John Holt mentions in his book. He returns and he says, "So, do not starve me. Will you starve me? What is our answer?" And our answer can be unschooling, perhaps for some people, and for other parents and children it's something else. But this freedom, I'm encouraging you to discover it more, this listening to children, via my Instagram, Unschooling Sue, with which I'm in the process of sharing photos and ideas of activities of unschooling for children and adults. I'm also going to do other language versions of this podcast, so it's in French. I'm currently, as you can probably hear from my voice, translating this from the French, so excuse me if there are some pauses, because I'm translating it live to give it to you as a free language resource, so you can listen to this in French and in English if you wish. All of these activities and ideas in unschooling will be shared on these platforms, and you can go and have a look at that with the links below the podcast, with the associations, references, petitions, blogs, videos below. And the final thing I would like to say is that in the spirit of unschooling, if you want to unlearn everything I've just said, that's your your free choice. It's up to you. It's just a suggestion and the beginning of a conversation on unschooling. Thank you for listening to me, and I hope to see you soon.